During the Renaissance, Italian artists created some of the most beautiful paintings and sculptures in the world. Rich families and church leaders hired the artists to create these works. New techniques made their work come alive. Renaissance ideas about the value of human life are reflected in the art of the time. Artists showed people more realistically than medieval artists had done. Renaissance artists studied the human body and drew what they saw. However, because artists often used classical statues as their guides, many of the human beings they drew were as perfect as Greek gods. Artists also used a new discovery, perspective, a method of showing a three-dimensional scene on a flat surface so that it looks real. Perspective uses various techniques. For example, people in the background are smaller than those in front. Also, straight lines, such as on floor tiles, appear diagonal. Colors could also show distance, so mountains in the background of a picture are a hazy blue. In the work of the greatest Italian artists, the people shown are clearly individuals. In this way, the art reflects the Renaissance idea of the value of human beings. For example, the figures in the painting below by the artist Raphael have clear personalities. Sandro Botticelli, a painter from Florence, also showed respect for people. Many of his paintings show scenes from Roman myths, but he painted everyone, whether ancient gods, saints, angels, or farmers, in fine detail. The work of Titian, the finest artist of Venice, reflects interest in the past. Like Botticelli, he often painted scenes from classical myths. For Venice's churches, though, Titian painted colorful scenes from Christian teachings. Of all the Italian Renaissance artists, two stand above the rest. Each is what we call a Renaissance person, someone who can do practically anything well. One of the greatest Italian artists was Michelangelo. He had many talents. Michelangelo designed buildings, wrote poetry, carved sculptures, and painted magnificent pictures. Perhaps his most famous work was a painting that covers the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel in the Vatican. The muscular human figures in the immense painting remind the viewer of Greek or Roman statues. The true genius of the Renaissance was Leonardo da Vinci. In fact, some call him the greatest genius that has ever lived. In addition to being an expert painter, Leonardo was a sculptor, architect, inventor, and engineer. He was even a town planner and mapmaker. Both nature and theology fascinated Leonardo. Detailed drawings of plants, animals, and machines fill his sketchbooks. To make his art more real, Leonardo studied anatomy, or the structure of human bodies. He dissected corpses to see how bones and muscles worked. Yet Leonardo's paintings also show human emotions. For example, people who see his Mona Lisa can't help wondering what made the lady smile. Many of the texts rediscovered in the 1300s dealt with science. For the first time in centuries, Europeans could read works by ancient scientists. After reading these works, Renaissance scholars went on to make their own scientific advances. Some scholars thought mathematics could help them understand the universe. They studied ancient math texts and built upon the ideas in them. In the process, they created symbols we still use in math today. For example, they created symbols for the square root and for positive and negative numbers. Advances in math led to advances in other fields of science. For example, engineers and architects used new mathematical formulas to strengthen buildings. One Renaissance architect who used these new ideas was Filippo Brunelleschi. He designed a huge dome for a cathedral in Florence. But Brunelleschi ran into a problem. The dome that he wanted to build was so big that it would be too heavy for the cathedral's walls to support. To solve the problem, he built the dome out of two thin, light layers instead of one thick, heavy one. Other Renaissance scientists wanted to know more about the sky and what was in it. They studied astronomy to learn about the sun, stars, and planets. In the Middle Ages, scientists had thought that the sun and stars revolved around the Earth. They thought that the Earth was the center of the universe. But Renaissance scientists learned that the Earth moves around the Sun. Later astronomers built on this discovery to lay the foundations for modern astronomy. Other scholars were less interested in the stars and more curious about the Earth itself. They wanted to know the exact size and shape of the Earth and its lands. The scholars used measurements and calculations made by merchants and sailors to create better, more accurate maps. In time, these changes in literature, art, science, and technology would spread beyond Italy. For these changes to spread, however, required changes in education. During the Middle Ages, students had concentrated on religious subjects. During the Renaissance, students learned about the humanities as well. History was one of the subjects that received more attention. An early Renaissance scholar named Petrarch wrote about the importance of knowing history. O inglorious age, that scorns antiquity, its mother, to whom it owes every noble art! What can be said in defense of men of education, who ought not to be ignorant of antiquity, and yet are plunged in darkness and delusion? Francisco Petrarch, quoted in a 1366 letter to Boccaccio. Petrarch's ideas would affect education for many years to come. Education and new ways of spreading information would take the Renaissance far beyond Italy.